Council member, hi. Hello. Oh, you're here by video. That's great. All right, we're getting
Yeah,
ready to start. They said you were going to be on by phone.
I,
Adrienne,
I
we
originally
were
was
we
going to do that, and I decided I might as well see people.
they want to see you. Well, I'm excited to see you. We're going to get ready to start
Sure,
just about now. Um, my staff is handling all this technical stuff. So,
got it.
how you been?
I've been okay. I've been good. It's a long road we're in here.
Oh, awesome. And Adrienne is on too. Hi,
Oh,
Aid.
okay. Hi, council member.
Hey.
Hi there. Good to
How-
see you, Russ.
Hi.
Greg.
So we're gonna Russ, if you don't mind, we're gonna give just some brief updates and then
Sure.
we're gonna get right into the event. So I'm just waiting
Okay.
for my staff to let me know. All righty.
All right, this is Manny Silva, and I'm going to go through some of the ground rules. So because of our experience with Facebook Live events and Zoom meetings in the past, we have disabled the chat. However, the way this meeting is going to run, the council members are going to give some updates. Then we're going to hear directly from NYCHA CEO Greg Russ. And then we are going to open up for a Q&A. So people that are using the Zoom platform, you can post your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. People that are using, have called in via phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand during the Q&A portion. Also, the people that are using Zoom, you can raise your hand on the bottom of the chat box. And for people on Facebook, please just post your questions on the bottom in the comment area, and staff will make sure that the council members and as well as CEO Greg Russ get that question. And so we're going to start off with Council Member Richards opening and some opening remarks and updates.
All righty, awesome. So I want to welcome everybody. Manny, are we on Facebook Live as well?
We're
Are we
on
ready?
Facebook Live, yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, great. Well, I want to welcome everybody this evening to our NYCHA virtual town hall. I guess Adrienne and Daneek and I and Russ are making history right here in Queens and in Southeast Queens in particular, doing the first virtual town hall I think we've ever done. But before we begin, we've lost a lot of people over the course of the last few days and weeks. And I want to do at least 30 seconds of silence for those individuals. We lost a really good friend. Adrienne and I both shared Jules Taylor from the Rosedale community. This one hit us all really hard because he was so full of life. But we have a lot of work to carry on in his memory. We also lost Dr. Chan out of the Adabo Health Center in the Rockaways. He was someone who stayed in our community for over 20 years and unfortunately passed to COVID as well just last week. And so I wanted to just start with giving a moment of silence before we begin. Thank you all. And Greg, if you don't mind, Adrienne and I are just going to give some brief updates, and then we're going to go to you to give some opening remarks, and then following, we will take Q&A from people who are watching, and Manny will help to organize that, and Adrienne and I will both float through questions and ask you questions as well. So today was a very interesting day, and Adrienne sits on the finance committee, so she's going to go through some of the things that have happened there. We have just started real negotiations with the mayor regarding the executive budget, which the council will pass, God willing, by June 30th, July 1st, but we're still pretty far apart. One of the things we pushed back today on is we talk about summer youth employment programming being canceled, and that was a proposal by the mayor. For those of you who don't know what the summer youth employment program is, it really employs thousands of young people during the summer to keep them out of trouble, to keep them off the streets. We don't want them to have police interactions. We want our young people to be able to get experience in prospective fields that they may have interest in. And I know for Adrienne and I and Daneek that we certainly take summer youth in our offices as well. They played a key role. I've actually hired some young people who started in summer youth and went on to do great things in college and came back home and got a taste of what government is like and wanted to actually be involved in their communities. So we are not happy with the proposed cuts there, and we've made that very clear, especially during COVID, where COVID has certainly shined a light on what we have known historically in a lot of our communities, in Black and Brown communities, the challenges around investment in public housing, our young people into new community centers, and with a looming about $7 billion cut that we will have to eat as a city if the federal government doesn't come up with resources. We have to make sure that those resources are not hitting the most vulnerable pockets of our communities. So today, it was very interesting waking up this morning with a tweet from Pat Lynch, not happy with me because we called for the police class, in which we support our police department. You know, there's no one who can say that Councilmember Richards hasn't supported the departments around Queens, that Adrienne Adams, that many council members do not support our police department. We're there when no one is there, certainly. But we have an obligation to our communities as well. And during a time when all of these looming cuts are coming down the line, our position is we should not actually fund a new police class. $25 million at this moment. First off, during COVID, crime is down. I mean, crime has, and even prior to COVID, there's been a lot of progress. We've had some setbacks, but we've all done a lot of work to make sure that community-based organizations like the crisis management system are being funded at historic levels so that our communities are the first response to violence and to people we know in our communities, our own family members in some cases, who really need the services so that they can get the assistance they need so they're not out there committing acts of violence. So policing is not the answer to resolving social ills. And if you don't believe me, you look at last night and, you know, we all ride the trains. I mean, I don't get chauffeured around in some fancy vehicle. Adrienne and I both take the train. We run into each other on the E-train sometime. And we all look at the situation around individuals who are homeless on the trains, individuals with mental health issues, right? But last night, the trains were shut down. And the newer model has been proposed by both the governor and the mayor. Of course, we want our essential workers to be able to ride trains not in filth. We want to ensure that our essential workers can get to and from work without being subjected to COVID. They're already being subjected to that in their workplaces to a great degree. So we want them to have the best quality of life. And this is why we invest heavily in our hospitals, even prior to COVID. But the question then becomes, last night, 1,000 police officers were put into our train system to get homeless people out of the system. Is that the true answer? So now what I project is we're going to start to see a lot more street homelessness in the wee hours of the morning as the trains get shut down. So this becomes a question of priorities. Should we be building more supportive housing? Should we be ensuring that individuals who need assistance are getting the mental health services that they need? That's what the true priorities of the budget should reflect. And if you don't believe me, you look at the impacts of Black and Brown communities during COVID, right? It's all the same systematic issues, the areas that have not historically been invested in, mental health, housing, youth, jobs. You know, those are the areas we want to see this budget focused on. So we will continue to raise our voice on this, but I'm very happy to have Adrienne Adams on, who was also on. She did not pull any punches this morning as we started our hearing with the de Blasio administration on the budget. And we're going to have to fight to make sure that through this crisis, that even as cuts come down the line, that our community resources aren't being cut. So just wanted to give some brief updates on that. And we will then go to, and my colleague Daneek has joined now. So we'll go to Councilmember Adams, the First Lady of Southeast Queens delegation and the City Council. And then we're going to
Black lady.
Fly lady from Southeast Queens to get some updates. Then we're going to go to Daneek. Then following Daneek, we'll go to Greg. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Richards, and thank you, CEO Russ, for being here today. Hello to my colleague, Daneek Miller. We are the dream team from Southeast Queens, even though it seems sometimes that we're living in a nightmare. So, but we're going to continue to go forward. Now, I'm going to try to keep my remarks specifically towards NYCHA because I think this is what we want to get to this evening. So we know that from the data, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on communities of color, Black people, and NYCHA has been hit very, very hard. So unfortunately, throughout the pandemic, NYCHA officials have been late to act. We want to know why that is. And we, just to bring up, we actually kicked off today or introduced our wishes, a lot of elected officials across the country. We want an investigation by the Department of Justice. And this was initiated by Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, Borough President Eric Adams, and we had a very expressive press conference this afternoon, just to let everyone know that we believe that there is a specific pattern, there is a specific reason, there are no mistakes why communities of color have been hit hard when it comes to instances and deaths with regard to the coronavirus. I don't know anyone, myself included, who has not been impacted by the devastation of the coronavirus. And if we look across the country, we see where the disparity lies. We see that, no, it is not just underlying health conditions. It is systemic racism. And it is something that we have to call out. It is something that is, quote unquote, residents in NYCHA as well, and resident in public housing across this country. So we really need to delve deep. We want the Department of Justice to meet our request to make an investigation across New York City and across this entire country and take a look at the reasons why communities of color have been so disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. Again, there is no mistake here. This is something that is happening, and the virus knows no respecter of person, as we biblically say. All we know is that for a reason, and we believe that it is for racial reasons, this virus has hit communities of color like an atom bomb across the United States. We want some answers, and we want the DOJ to provide those answers to us. So that said, I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues. As Councilmember Richards said, I'm not one to pull a whole lot of punches. I call it as I see it. And I know that sometimes things are hard to hear, but we're going to continue to work together as a unit, as those of us that have been born and bred in Southeast Queens, that love Southeast Queens, and want to see our people flourish and not die. So I look forward to tonight's discussion so that we can move forward tonight, move together forward in the future. We look forward to the conversation. We look forward to your questions, and thank you.
Thank you. The Dream Team is in the house. We're going to go now to my colleague, Daneek Miller, who's doing a lot of work around the MTA shutdown, and doing a lot of work around all the specific issues. And let me just remind folks of how cohesive this unit is. You have both of the chairs. You have Adrienne and Daneek Miller, who are both the chairs of the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus of the City Council. So I want you to know that we are moving in unison, but that, you know, our power enables us to really shift a lot of things around the city collectively. And this is why it's always great to work collectively with both of them. So I want to go to my colleague, Daneek Miller.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for bringing us together. Councilmember Adams, man, we got to stop meeting like this, man. We, we are all constantly together. To the chair, thank you so much for being here with us. My colleagues mentioned what we all know to be a fact, the disproportionate impact on communities of color throughout the city, throughout the state, and quite frankly, throughout the nation, quite frankly, throughout the world. When this pandemic is global, and there are quarters in France, in England, and other places where we make up the minority, but certainly the majority of the folks that are being infected and impacted in a negative way by COVID-19. And so we've spent a lot of time together with our colleagues in government at the city, state, and federal level, as well as community leaders, really engaging, discussing, and attempting to navigate, calling out vigorously the need for testing. Why do we need testing? Because we need to know where, when, and how people are being infected. Secondly, where to send those resources once we know where those infections are. And then thirdly, and equally as important, as we, God willing, come out of this pandemic, what do we learn, right? And unless we have the data to support why we had these disproportionate responses, in particular, as we came to infrastructure or the lack thereof, hospitalizations and hospital and healthcare institutions, education, transportation, all of these things contribute in a big way to the impact of COVID-19, as well as any other crisis that we see that comes throughout the country, how it is heightened in our community because of the lack of this infrastructure. So if we're not doing testing and understanding all of those stages, it doesn't happen. Because quite frankly, a year from now, as we begin to aggregate this data and talk about the needs, talk about infrastructure, talk about recovery, talk about stimulus, you know what's going to happen if we're not tested? They're like, nah, them folks had preconditioned existence conditions. They had these things. It wasn't COVID. And so when you saw the jump about 3,700 additional last week, and people kind of freaked out, we was like, no, we knew that those numbers existed, that people hadn't been counted, and we were calling for people to be counted. We want to keep it real. And sometimes it's painful, but once we get past that, we knew it was a good thing that the truth crushed the earth was coming to light. And so we have to stay on that because that's really our strength. And so as it relates to NYCHA, NYCHA is we're talking about what are the cities and the locations that have been impacted. With New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, New Orleans, all cities of color, dominated by folk of color, and particularly Black folk that are being impacted. And NYCHA, in particular, has a population almost as large as all of those cities. The difference is that they're not stacked on top of each other, right? That they're not depending on a government and a former surgeon acting as a secretary of HUD to really understand the needs and values of those folks and to turn around and be able to provide for those needs and those values for those NYCHA residents. And so that creates a particular quagmire for NYCHA because, those folks are, those residents are particularly dependent on federal government and then states and cities, which quite frankly, who don't necessarily have the capacity to manage that. And that's under normal circumstances, right? And here's my experience. And so I want to talk about my small oversight here from a NYCHA perspective is that we have only 2 senior complexes, NYCHA complexes in the district, and that is the extent of the 27th district there. Oh, that is super important because that is our most vulnerable population. Those are the folks whose shoulders that we stand on, and they deserve the quality of life that they deserve in their golden years, and we have to make sure that we are giving it to them. With that being said, I myself, born and raised in NYCHA, and have had an experience that I would never trade for anything in the world. It is a great part of the man that I have become, and I would hope that everyone, every resident can have the same experience, although I know that is not the case because of the infrastructure that does not exist, the support and investment that does not exist now. So a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and let's turn this crisis to an opportunity. Let's engage, let's talk about this, and let's be very, very proactive as we come at this. Again, Chair Richards, I want to thank you for your leadership. This young man makes us proud every day, every day, every day. And I am truly blessed to be a part of a team, the Southeast Queens Dream Team, which really goes beyond the City Council to all of our brothers and sisters in government. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're now going to, sorry, Greg, Senator Leroy Comrie has joined us. So I want to make sure we give him an opportunity to give some greetings as well. And he's the head of the corporation. I guess he's the head of so many different agencies at the state. I can't keep up, but he's the head of everything. I don't know what it is, but he's doing a great job, and good to see him.
Small committee, corporations,
yeah, right.
Corporations and authorities, that's all, but you got it. Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank Councilmember Richards for putting this together. And you know, this is an important discussion, what we do for the future of NYCHA, what we do for dealing with COVID, and what we do to respect the tenants and the folks that are there. You know, these NYCHA facilities are actually excellent apartments that anyone in the city would want to live in if they were maintained and kept in good condition. And you know, I was very disturbed when I got a call from the head of the president of South Jamaica's tenant association, saying that when the COVID materials were dropped off, he didn't get a heads up. It was dropped off in a public place where most of it was tampered with before it was even they had an adequate chance to even assess what it was and make an opportunity for distribution. And since there was no notice or given to him, he was unable to make sure that it was done in a proper manner. And even the way that it was delivered was disrespectful. So I think we need to work to get past that. We have good people that are living in NYCHA, people that want to try to contribute to the quality of life, and they want to be able to do everything they can to make sure that their children and families can live properly. And we need to respect that and make sure that they're included in the plans to make sure that the future of NYCHA is happening. I want to thank the new CEO, or I forget your title, for being here this evening. We haven't had a chance for a one-on-one discussion yet, but I hope for good things from your leadership to make sure that there's an opportunity to ensure that NYCHA can move into the 21st century intact and expanded, and but especially with the respect for the tenants that are there, the people that have been holding down the place, maintaining it so that it can stay a viable place for people to live, and that they can continue to expect that they can be there in safety and security and proper renovated spaces for much time. And I know that that's something that requires a collaboration from all levels, and hopefully a change in federal government down the line and also a change in how we perceive NYCHA is funded and taken care of and secured. But I'm willing to be part of that discussion, but we have to do it with the respect for the people that have been holding on, doing everything they can to have a decent quality of life in there. And again, thank you, Councilmember Richards, for allowing me to be part of this. There's a lot of things going on this evening, so I'm going to be popping in and out. But if there's any questions that are specific on the state level, please count on my support to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now, without further ado, we have our chairman, Greg Russ, and he's a pretty good dancer. I saw you had a few moves over the summer in some of the developments. I was very happy to see you getting out there and talking to residents and getting a feel of New York City. I forgot where you relocated from, but want to congratulate you, one, on being here in the city, and look forward to working very closely with you to make sure that our NYCHA residents, as our senator said, are treated with the respect and dignity that they deserve. And we know that also means investment as well. So we'll be here continuing to be a voice on that. So I want to go to Greg Russ.
All right, council member, thank you. And thanks all for your comments so far, because I think I'm just going to make a few remarks because I know we have the near term and the issues we're in to deal with. But I want to say a couple things about NYCHA's future. I think one of the things that the comments and the observations of any of us who are in New York City, the reinvestment in NYCHA properties has got to be part of the bringing us out of this COVID dilemma and into the future. We've known that these buildings have been, to use the real estate term, they're undercapitalized. In a normal cycle, these buildings would have had at least 3 rounds of reinvestment. One of the reasons that we have some of the difficulties that we have is that we have major issues in these buildings that a simple repair will not fix, so we fix it many times. We also have opportunities here, and I want to be clear that we are going to vigorously pursue recapitalization of the entire portfolio, all of the stock, that we're going to, if I can use the word, make a demand on the federal government inside the existing rules that we believe could lead to more capital for this set of properties that's so valuable for the city of New York. And I want to say that if we are successful in raising this capital, and I'm not necessarily talking about RAD, I'm not talking about privatization, I'm talking about thinking about how to lift up these buildings and the people who live there in a way that is to scale and is appropriate given the circumstances we have in the city. One of the things we would have a chance to do, if we can invest in the buildings, we can invest in the health of those families, not only by fixing the things that are not right now, things that we all know, you've experienced them, you've had your constituents call you, they call me and others too. We can fix those apartments. We can make those apartments into something that anyone, they're beautiful. They need repair. And the other thing that can happen, if we can raise this money, we can begin to think about where the health services should be. I know that there are clinics and walk-in centers all over town, but could we imagine a NYCHA where there's a health service space right in the building, where someone can get access to, even if it's just a nurse practitioner to check your blood pressure, or someone to give you advice on if you're not feeling well, or mental health providers. I mean, there's a lot that could be done if we can invest in these properties. They were built to last, and they have lasted, but they need that refresh. They need that, and this is what these families deserve. This is not right to have our conditions be so difficult. It's difficult on NYCHA's side for a number of reasons. We're going to have to fix that too. We're not going to be able to operate the same way we've operated. But we believe that we can come up with a plan to make this investment and to call the question about how to invest in NYCHA on the scale that it needs. And this is not going to fix things tomorrow, but we have to believe in this vision of a NYCHA that can last another 50 years. One that is a good place to live in terms of building conditions, that releases the potential of the families that live in those buildings because they live in a good place. And I very much am committed to doing that with your help. I appreciate the support that you give us. And it's going to be needed as we make this fight going forward. We do not have, I would say, a federal situation that's particularly helpful for us. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what it means to raise capital for public housing at the federal level. But I do think we have a chance to push this, and we want to be aware of it, and we're going to take it, and we're going to be aggressive about it, because we have waited far too long. We have waited 40 years too long in some cases to make the investments in these apartments that they need. And I think it can be done. I think we can do it. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's what the community needs. That community needs it. And another thing, the last thing I'll say is, every dollar of capital that we invest in the NYCHA building is worth $2.12 in the economy at large. So that means it's not just construction jobs, but it's all the ancillary jobs that go along with supporting a construction effort of the scale that we'd be talking about. So I know there's questions on our near-term responses and issues, and we're prepared to talk about those tonight. But I felt like your remarks they're really moving in a sense, because we have to act for this future. We have to act for all the children that live in our properties. We have to act for all the seniors. And we know that COVID is particularly hard on seniors. And we want to, in some ways, be responsive to that and rebuild both for them and also in the memory of those we lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And we're gonna start to open it up. And I guess, Manny, you know how to do this stuff more than I do, but I see raised hands. So for those of you who don't know how to ask a question, if you're on Zoom, you can hit your screen, hit more, and raise your hand, and then we could call on you that way. All right, I guess y'all are working. I see 7 hands raised. And then if you are on Facebook Live, leave your question in the box as well, and we will all do our best to answer all the questions. If we can't answer your questions, we will certainly get back to you. And I want my colleagues to also chime in. I don't want to answer all the questions tonight, but certainly want this to be very interactive between us. So let me do this. We'll go to Diana Blackwell first. I see she raised her hand on Zoom. Manny, do you want to unmute her or?
Okay. She is on, she has to unmute herself. I'm gonna unmute.
Unmute
Right, so
myself. Okay, I'm ready.
She's unmuted.
Hi.
All right, and we're going to ask
Hello,
you just before
everyone.
you begin, just some ground rules for everybody. We want you to ask a question, but we want you to be as concise and precise as possible so we can try to get through as many questions as possible for people tonight as we have Greg, right? I think we're trying to close this out. The time is now 5:41. By 6:30, we want to start to try to wrap this down. So please ask your questions. If you are a bot in this room, we're going to disconnect you. Please go find another room to play around in. We're here to talk about serious business. So please don't waste folks' time playing around in this room if you're here. So far, so good, though. All righty. So, Manny, yeah, you could go to, ma'am, you can ask your question. Miss Diana Blackwell.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting this talk. I would like to say, based on what you said, lifting up people in the buildings that used to have those services, and rightfully should. NYCHA, being the size of a large city, should have the same services as any large city. It's called self-sufficiency. Aggressiveness is creating a plan that we can work unionized jobs in our own home. Can you work with us to create this aggressiveness for our own selves? Thank you.
All right. Greg, if you want to go to that first.
Sure. Yes, we can, because here's the thing about the kind of work that we want to do as we go forward. First, because of NYCHA's track record, we're compelled to think about a different future. not only because it's the right thing to do, but because we also have the monitorship agreement that we all signed on to. Remember, that's with HUD, the city, NYCHA, the Southern District of New York. And that agreement's going to require us to do two things. It's going to require us to invest heavily in compliance in areas where we have not been as strong as we should be. It's going to require us also to reorganize NYCHA. That is one of the elements of the agreement. And we have to think about reorganizing NYCHA in a way that delivers the services that the resident should receive. And to the other part of your question about, yes, we have the chance, if we can raise the capital, to create all manner of job opportunities. I'm going to give one example. We think we would, if we had the money, abandon the centralized boiler systems that have been in place for many, many years, some as old as me, and that's pretty old. We would move to systems that are building-based. These types of systems, these types of boilers are not like the ones we maintain now. Someone is going to have to know how to maintain that unit. Someone is going to have to know how to fix that new technology. And that's an opportunity for families that live in NYCHA, for people who want to learn new skills. And that can be created both as part of the construction process, but long-term as part of the maintenance process. So yes, I think there's opportunity there for skills across the board as we update and modernize our technologies, and we can teach people and they can earn the living wage that you mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you.
Surely.
Okay, and then let me just add, I just wanted to go back, and I know my colleagues could chime in on this too. The census is up now. Everybody should be filling out the census. If we're not being counted, it's very hard for our congressmen, for us to go back to the federal government and say, we need more. We need every NYCHA resident to fill out their census. It takes 5 minutes. My staff is going to post that information. I think it's census.gov, but go on and fill out the census. Very important. Just wanted to stress that. I don't know if Adrienne or Daneek want to chime in on that as well, because they've been doing a lot of work around that.
I do. Councilmember Richards, I couldn't have said it better myself. I was actually going to mention census before we started to roll, and I think this is the perfect forum to reinforce that once again. We lost 3 hospitals in the last census. One of the reasons why we are being impacted so heavily in this pandemic is because of our response or lack thereof in the 2010 census. We are right now one of the lowest areas in Southeast Queens for responses in the census. So we're actually in a lesser position right now than we were in 2010 as far as census responses. And that really shouldn't be, because we're locked down. We're inside. So there are ways to do this. We can do it online, we can do it by phone, but it's got to get done, because I'm telling you, other communities have gotten these resources year after year, decade after decade. The census matters. The fact that you are not counted means that you're invisible. And I keep on saying it, we are not counted and we are invisible, but we have that power. At least we have the power of the census. So please, everyone that is watching this, everyone that is listening to this, if you have not completed your census, takes 2 to 5 minutes to do that. Please, please, please complete the census. It is vital to our existence.
Yep, and I would simply add all the things that directly contribute to the impact, the disproportionate impact on COVID and all the other crises that hit the city, hit the state, hit the nation, impact us far worse because those things have a direct correlation between the census and the things that come by virtue of the census. And in this case, we're talking about infrastructure investment. We're talking about schools, school buildings, technology. Our children are home and don't have the equipment to learn remotely. They don't have the infrastructure to support them. Certainly hospitals have manifested itself, or the lack thereof, in a really big way during this national health crisis. And then transportation and roads and highways. All of those things have a direct impact on how services get delivered. Health and sciences, education, transportation gets you to and from, and it is so absolutely important. It is money, power, and respect. How do we get it? Census.
Okay, we're going to try to go through questions between Facebook Live and here. This question is from Martha Indiana Porter. Has the city released any specific details and numbers about infection and death rates for NYCHA residents and NYCHA staff members? And I guess that's to you, Greg.
Okay. I would say that they're in the process of gathering data. I would not say that that information has been released or shared yet, but I can tell you we have some numbers related to NYCHA staff that I can share. We have an estimated 441 individuals that we think have been impacted by COVID, and that is 181 confirmed cases, 260 probables, and we have lost 10 employees as a result of the pandemic. These are, we think there are probably some additional cases that we don't have fully reconciled yet because we're comparing our records in the field with HR, but those are, that's probably at the low end, we think. And I want to say one other thing about our staff, because I think this is very important. We're hovering between 70 and 75% of the line staff, the essential workers, coming to work. And I want to give a shout out to them for coming to the job every day. This is a tough time to get up and come into your building or your area or work on your team. And it's been very heartening for us to be able to say that. It's one of the reasons we've been able to keep essential functions. We've scaled back much of our response and are dealing with emergencies and critical work. But part of the reason we're even able to do that is because folks are coming into work. I assume that at some point the city will be making data available on a large scale, but I don't have that data this evening.
All righty, thank you. I guess we'll go to the next raised hand. We'll go to Karen Blondell. Manny?
Hello.
Hello, hi Karen.
Hi, Greg, Russ, and
Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I wanted to ask.
And please identify which development you're from, if you're from a development too, just so we know
I
who's
work. I work with the Fifth Avenue Committee. So I live in Red Hook, and I cover Red Hook, Gowanus, Wyckoff, and Warren. And I wanted to ask, even with the panelists, who's on the panel representing Brooklyn? Is there anybody on the panel representing this part of Brooklyn?
Well, this town hall was situated for Southeast Queens and Queens in general, so we open it up for Queens. So I know many elected officials also in Brooklyn organizing things too. So I would definitely watch out for those as well. But if you have something related since you're on, we welcome you.
So I do want to speak about the census. I spoke to someone in State Assembly and I found out that they're not sending out hard copies of the census form. For the most part, people are getting postcards and and then they're told to either go online or to make a phone call. I don't think that works for public housing because in each development, we have at least 40% disabled and seniors. And I don't think that they have the computer savvy. So did anybody ask the census to specifically send hard copy mailed forms to public housing residents? That's my question.
Well, absolutely. You should be getting hard copies if you haven't already. I know I got one in the mail. I know many people who got them in the mail. If you want to follow up with us, if you want to inbox us, so we could have your information just to triple check, we can put you in touch with folks from the census. And I think we're all collectively looking at doing a census event as well. But we're in touch with them. The council also has a budget set aside for census advocacy and work as well. So we can take your information and just find out and have them follow up with you. But you should have received, I know I got it by snail mail too. And everybody in my household did, but you also have the capability of doing it online. And I know exactly what you're saying. Not everybody has access to internet as well. So we could follow up with you offline on that.
Right, and just to end it, I just want to say that because this pandemic locked the city down in mid-March, I noticed that a lot of people who had second homes fled the city. So that means that those people who were living and creating more density around public housing actually abandoned New York City in mid-March. And I'm wondering, like, they've been here, some of them for 5-10 years, but now they're being counted upstate in Pennsylvania and Florida because they escaped the city during this pause. And is anybody going to make sure that that's factored in regards to the census numbers?
I mean, that's more of a federal question, but certainly when we do that.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Got it. All right. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. All right. We'll move to the next question. To Greg, we'll go to Tisha.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So hi Greg. It's finally nice to meet you. I'm from Stanley Isaacs on the Upper East Side, preferably maybe Holmes Towers. My question is, what are we gonna do about the updating of our transfer system? Because I've had a transfer in for a year now, and I was diagnosed with COVID, and it's just me and my children in a 1-bedroom, and I couldn't quarantine myself away from my children because there was nowhere for me to go to make sure that they weren't exposed. So, I mean, I know a lot of residents are living under these conditions, which now I'm about to bring another child into the world. And now it's going to be 4 of us on top of each other. And if this situation gets, if there's another wave, and say, because I'm a frontline worker also, so I work for a hospital, and, if there's a second wave and I potentially contract this virus, there's nowhere for me to quarantine myself away from my children, and it's just me and them, and I have no one that can take them or relieve me of the duties until I recover.
Right, and I think that's a good question, and this could go for everybody. So the city has recently announced an isolation program for individuals who need to self-isolate, and I believe including NYCHA residents. Greg, can you touch on that?
Yeah, we are talking to the city about accessing that. I think originally that was intended for, it started as a hotel program for first responders, but has been expanding. So we are talking about trying to access that for people who do need that space. So I don't have any more details to share, except that we are going to try and get access to that for some of these families. Tisha, if it's possible, if you could send your individual information through one of the council members, pick it up, and we can at least look at your transfer request. I'm going to be candid. The transfers are really tough because we have such a low vacancy rate generally. Folks that with the units that turn over are relative to our size is pretty limited. And that makes one of the reasons why we wind up with folks waiting for some periods of time, often very long time, transfer. But If you can get your individual information to us, we can look into it and give you a read on what the potential is. So we'd be glad to do that.
Yes, because my options have been wait 20 years or move out of a community that I'm
Yeah.
very active in, that I'm very,
Got it.
Right.
that I'm, building relationships with tenants, and
Got it.
my children are in school. They, I've just built a community here, and
Right.
the place
got
that I
it.
live in is very safe. Where I came from wasn't so safe. So
Okay.
it's just things like that is like you can't just pick up and leave,
Sure.
due to circumstances.
Got it. We got your information. So you're gonna inbox that. We'll follow up with you. So thank you for your question. We're gonna go to the next question. Next question comes from Gina Gibson, Beach 41st Street houses in the Rockaways. They keep having problems with their gas lines in their residential units in which they are not able to cook. Vendors have been hired to clean the building, and she doesn't believe they're doing a great job. So can you just speak to, or could we have somebody follow up on that, Greg?
Okay. I'll do two things in a general way. The gas outages are really difficult. This is a issue that we struggle with. There's a number of reasons why they become difficult. A lot of times when there is an outage, we're dealing with asbestos, and we have to remediate the asbestos. This requires multiple visits into the units, and that takes time. There's a substantial amount of coordination among NYCHA, utility provider, and Department of Buildings. We oftentimes have to wind up repiping in the buildings. So what looks to be something that should be a simple fix is really, really complicated. And it's complicated in part because of the age of many of these piping systems. So we do have, we can provide particular information if she leaves it in the inbox, and we can follow up with her. It's about 11 units. I think that impacted, and I think it started in February, and I know we've received the Department of Building permits, so we're going to be starting work there. And maybe once we're able to do that, we can get an estimate of when we'd be ready to get the gas back on. As to the cleaning, we have launched very early, around March 11th, around 11th and 13th, the touch point cleaning in the senior buildings 5 times a week, and in the family sites 3 times a week. So these are the high touch areas, and the vendors have been working, and we have been monitoring them very closely. We have somewhere in the vicinity of 100 site inspections a week. These are actual observations of what the vendors are doing all over the city. We have immediate feedback to their crews and their supervisors. We are making sure that they are applying things correctly, following the instructions they need to follow. And that's now throughout the system. We have 3 departments involved in monitoring them, and also making sure that the cleaning is on the touch point areas. This is not going to clean the entire lobby. It's not going to clean an entire hallway, but it's the places where people put their hands, mailboxes, elevator pads, stair rails, those kinds of things. And there may be other questions later, and we can get into specifics about how we've been doing all that, but we have been stepping up the game and making sure that they're delivering the service.
Thank you. All right, going to go to the next question, and this is from A.U. Hogan. I guess we can go to Councilmember Adams and Miller on this specific subject, and I know we've all been doing a lot of work and raising our voice around social distancing violations. So for those who are not aware of what we're seeing, we've seen certain communities being over-policed when it comes to social distancing, summonses and arrests being given unfairly and unjustly depending on your geography and color or race, whether you're black and brown compared to if you're white, or based on what geography you live in the city. Different people are getting treated differently. So AU Hogan wanted to know from us, what have we been doing around this specific subject? It's not necessarily just a NYCHA question, but I guess we can also base it around NYCHA as well, because we know a lot of our NYCHA residents are impacted as well here. So I'll go to Councilmember Miller and then Adams to just talk a little bit about some of the work they've been doing around the social distancing inequities we're seeing.
Well, there's a couple of dynamics, and the first is whether or not, you know, social distancing is a relevant tool as to addressing COVID-19, and I would submit that it absolutely is, right? Because science, the science that we do know that has not changed is in fact that the best way to prevent infection is to social distance, washing hands regularly, and so forth. That being said, there is, as we said, being in NYCHA, that is a unique situation that there is extreme density and folk right on top of each other. But then there's another reality, and the other reality is that just as we understood the data, what the data was going to be before the data was even revealed, that our communities were being disproportionately impacted, that our communities were lacking services and resources. And so it's kind of incumbent on us to make the first move and to be able to speak truth to power as to what is needed. And the first thing and also to control what we can control. And what we can control is social distancing, right? And that is really important. And so I don't believe that it is the job of the NYPD. I think that just by its very nature, that's a recipe for disaster. Asking them to enforce social distancing, I think it's for us to enforce. I think it is for us to educate our community on the fact that we are being disproportionately impacted, that it is our sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters that are being impacted, and that it is our responsibility to make sure that what we can control is social distancing, at least to the best of our ability. And AU knows a lot about being a credible messenger, right? And we all have to become those credible messengers in this fight on COVID-19.
Yeah, I absolutely concur with Councilmember Miller, and Councilmember Richards, I think that you summed this up well, especially as being our chairperson for public safety. You know, there are two sides of this whole issue. There is the social distancing, which, as Councilmember Miller just mentioned, it is absolutely necessary for social distancing to save lives. It is proven. And we have to do our part. As I go about, in our communities around, we are not really practicing social distancing the way that we can be or should be practicing social distancing outdoors in too many places. So what that does, and hi AU, so what that does is it number one makes a vulnerable people already more vulnerable and susceptible to those things that we know. Those factions that we know are already not particularly friendly towards us in normal situations, much less abnormal situations. So the other side of that coin becomes what Councilmember Richards says, is that we can't police our way out of coronavirus. We can't do it. So what it's taken a look at, NYPD that should be giving out masks and gloves in our community and are actually giving out, injuries from tasers instead, or beatdowns. That is absolutely unacceptable. Again, we are doing our best to keep this on the forefront. Every time an issue is brought to our attention, we hold the mayor and the NYPD commissioner accountable, and they have to answer, particularly to our chair of public safety, and I do sit on that committee as well. So they have to answer to him when he calls. when we call. He has to answer to that. So there is no getting around the leadership in the council, being Black and brown leadership on several important committees right now. There's no way to get around to Donovan Richards and public safety. There's no way to get around an Adrienne Adams and Daneek Miller for the BLAC. There's no way to get around us. So it's going to take a while to get through to this system that has been traditionally set up to work against us and look at us as some kind of way instead of a better way to say it, particularly, responsible human beings, which we know that we're the backbone and the fabric, of this country. So there's different ways to look at it. But again, I'm going to go back to Councilmember Miller's point. We have to be diligent in practicing social distancing protocol. We have to save our lives and we have to save our families' lives. We have to save our neighbors' lives. So we have to be particularly careful when it comes to keeping social distancing protocol on the forefront.
Thank you, Adrienne. Faye Hill had a question. Senior citizens in NYCHA, I believe there's a program being rolled out for tablets, Greg. Can you speak to that? I believe NYCHA residents, senior citizens in NYCHA will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
The mayor is offering 10,000 tablets to senior citizens, and we're beginning to survey to determine which of the senior citizen households would want a tablet. I believe these are Sprint and T-Mobile is making this donation. The tablets come with 1 year of service on their network is part of the package. So it's quite a deal in the near term because I don't know all the specifics of the data package, but it would get you online and give you a chance to be able to communicate another way potentially. So that is just started in terms of identifying families that would like to access a tablet. The other thing I would say is that if folks who, especially senior citizens, we've been kind of thinking about this ourselves, if they do take on the tablet, it gives us another way to communicate as well besides a phone. And in some cases, depending on their operating system or what it is, you can do what we're doing and actually check in with someone and see them face to face. So that's potentially another way we can do that, because we have now made over 51,000 phone calls to the seniors, and we've personally talked to about 28,000 individuals as a result of that outreach. And I think if we can enrich the outreach in other ways, it helps us protect some of our most vulnerable. And there is a target list of developments, and we can provide that. And we are working with the Mayor's Technology Office for that outreach. So if there's additional questions on that, we could give you that information.
And will you be, and will folks have to, do they need to survey for this specific assistance to get it? Or do they need to call in anywhere, or it's just automatically going to go?
Councilman, I'm not quite, I know that we are outreaching, but I don't want to misspeak on that, because I think we are checking in those targeted developments, and
Okay.
We can get that information to you so it's available.
So they're going to be targeted developments on this?
Yeah, to be, at least in the start, they've targeted a certain number and locations. And I think depending on the demand, there's the potential to broaden that outreach. And of course, I feel if we go to the providers, there's always the potential to increase folks who have that technology beyond what this initial donations provided.
Okay, all righty. So we'll be watching that, and I'm hoping that many of the communities that have been impacted the most by COVID are the ones that are going to be provided and prioritized. So Southeast Queens, the Rockaways.
I think that's factored into the targeting process.
Queensbridge, Astoria, all of the areas in Western Queens as well. All righty, we're going to go to questions. All right, I'm going to go to I don't know who this person is. 718. I'm not going to say your number out loud, but we'll try this first person, Manny. There's no name attached. Actually, I will not go to that person. Alrighty, I'm gonna. Oh, okay. Hello.
Talk to this conference that they have going
Hello.
on now.
You're on, ma'am. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. You're on. State your name and who you're representing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Oh boy, the system here. This Miss Hutton from Colin Light Tower Senior Building. Do you hear me?
Hey, Miss
Yes,
Hutton.
we do.
How are you doing?
Hi, Miss Hutton.
Thank you. Taking one day at a time. I want to address this to all ears here. I done got to this age that with the virus, I'm praying, ask God to get me through all of this to live a little longer and safely. But right now, Councilman Miller, we need more follow-up. They got the $220,000 for our steel doors and key fobs. We got so many drug addicts in here that's living in here. Prostitutes are living in here. They're using the bathroom, the stairway as a bathroom and a bedroom. 3 people been robbed already in here. And some of them are coming in here without masks. It's horrible. And I was trying very much to find out how we can get a security guard for the morning from 6 to 2, 7 to 3, until they get those doors up. Everything is getting worse. It's not getting better. And a lot of us are scared because a lot of these drug addicts are, when you come out your door, your apartment, they're sitting there by your door sleeping.
Thank you, Ms. Hutton. Thank you so much for expressing that. So I see, Mr. Chair, that you have your staff on the line, and so I am going to put folk on blast because prior to COVID, we were supposed to do a walkthrough of the property with Ms. Hutton. We allocated money for cameras as well as security doors.
The key fobs and the steel doors.
And
we got cameras.
And well, we did the cameras, and it's been nearly 4 years.
Yeah.
For that to happen, and it's been in the queue for capital improvements. I have spoken to your folk, and in fact, my staff on a regular basis. I have the emails here from just this week in the communications to NYCHA, and security seems to be an issue. And I was waiting to the end to kind of bring that up, but certainly all of our residents, in particular our seniors developments, deserve the type to live in dignity and respect and not have their residents be permeated by what we see there, and they shouldn't have to do that. So, and in lieu of the lack of security on that end, we've coordinated with the 103rd precinct, but there's no real deterrent, and we've made an investment. We'd like to see our capital investment come to fruition, the security doors come in, as well as additional security for that particular facility, and whatever needs to happen beyond. Could you just say whether or not there is, I think I read in the email that all senior developments have a minimum of 8 hours
Yes.
security, and then what happens if we want to allocate more?
There is a guard there for 8 hours, and maybe one of the things we can do is look at that shift and what time. I don't know the.
I hate to interrupt her, but I'm gonna give you a little scenario with that. The guard comes in from 10 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning. Sometimes they throwing keys out in the back, gives to them to come to the back, and sometimes they come in through the front. You need 2 guards until you get those steel doors and key fobs. Everybody in this building got keys, even the drug addicts, some of the prostitutes, and a lot of them are not wearing masks here.
So, Greg, could we
Yeah.
get a shift. And I know in the past I've spoken to Ms. Hutton too as the chair of public safety, and there was some slight improvements in communication with the NYPD, but really that's just a short-term and temporary fix.
Yeah.
So
No, this is, I do want to comment on the door project has a target construction date start of July 2020. So it's in the design phase. We're finishing up with that. I can't represent how the kind of the COVID slowdown will impact that time, but that was our goal. And the target construction end date would have been November of 21, and that's for the system that was referred to. But I do want to take one other moment here, because we're experiencing, and we are in conversations with DHS and NYPD, because we're seeing an uptick in folks trying to get in and enter the buildings across the city, not just in the property we were just speaking of. So I do want to tell the council members and the public that we are going to be meeting and talking about a way to deal with this. We have some other properties, not in your districts, that have also been impacted by this. We want to see if we can come up with a compassionate but effective solution to move some of these folks out of the building and do it in a way, the criminals, obviously, if they're there, that's a different situation, but we have seen that more and more in the past few months.
thank you. Thank you. We look
Thank
forward
you,
to
Ms. Hutton.
following up. Thank you, Ms. Hutton. We're going to go to, I got Monica Morales from Channel 11 News has a question. I'll go to her briefly. Monica?
Hi. I didn't think you'd call on me. Hello. How are you?
Monica,
Thanks
we
for
always call
calling.
you.
You
Hi,
do great
hi.
work around NYCHA. That's why I'm letting you. That's why I'm calling on you. You've been
Oh my
consistent, so you get a pass.
Well, I'm so happy that this event is going on. It's been so good so far. Someone already asked my question, but I have a few more questions.
All right, you gotta make it brief. This is for the NYCHA residents, so I gotta
Yeah,
make sure
no, make
you.
it quick.
I love you, Monica, but we gotta get to the residents, so you can make them as precise and concise as possible.
You know, so many residents that I talk to say they really want to know how many residents have COVID-19. And I know there's privacy issues, but could you go more in depth as to why you can't release the numbers? Because we know a lot of seniors are suffering, especially in NYCHA. And also testing. I've talked to several council members that want testing in every single development. Can we get to that point?
We do have privacy issues. I mean, the Department of Health is, in fact, that's also true for our own employees. They have to self-identify. So there is restrictions on what can be shared and when it can be shared. And we don't keep that information on, that's actually kept by DOH-MH. I do know that they are looking at the data, the citywide information. And I think, Monica, to your question, at some point, we'll see data that's reflective of not just NYCHA, but the city as a whole, probably in some abundance. And the second part, we have had two initiatives, one with backing from the state, one with backing from the city to do testing. NYCHA is not the testing agent, but we're certainly open to facilitating the ability to test. And for example, two different entities we're working with, we've made sure that they have the agreements in place to go on the property and perform the tests. We'd be glad to collaborate with others who might want to expand that testing protocol. So we're very open to that, and we'd see that as helpful as well. But that's not a NYCHA initiative, but we're supportive of those initiatives from other places.
Thank you.
And let me just add, there is an organization I know Congressman has led on it, and we've all collaborated together. We're actually doing testing door to door for NYCHA residents, so we can get you that information. I know they started out in the Rockaways. They
Yes,
should
right.
be done the Rockaways. I think they're going into South Jamaica
This
if they
week.
haven't already. This week they're going
This
into
week.
South Jamaica.
Ready
Houses.
responders.
Ready responders, and
Oh,
we'll
yes.
post that information. And then they're working their way to Western Queens, so they'll be doing all the developments. I believe Queensbridge and Astoria and all of the developments up there, and Woodside and all the developments up there as well. So that's something we want to thank Congressman Gregory Meeks, who could not be here tonight, who's really led on that issue. And we'll post that information too. I know we put that out already. So I want to thank you for your question. All righty. All right, we're going to go to the next questions. All right, I'm looking through these. Can you just go through, Russ, can you talk about coordination? So the governor obviously has had an initiative around hand sanitizers and masks. And I believe what was announced is every NYCHA resident is supposed to get a mask and hand sanitizer. We've heard some complaints about the way hand sanitizer, I believe, is being distributed as well. So if you can just go through that while we're here.
So we certainly welcome opportunities for our sister and brother entities to provide us with the things that are helpful. There are two initiatives currently beyond any private donations. There have been some private individuals who donated as well. The one was in conjunction with the state, and that was originally intended to be coordinated through the tenant associations. I think one of the issues there is we had the good intentions, but the size and amount of material that was delivered was unexpected. And I think it left a lot of the tenant associations in a difficult spot. We have tried to help, with some of that where we've, where the tenant associations were in particularly difficult straits, but that again was not a NYCHA initiative. And the governor's office did work directly with the tenant association leaders. I think the big problem with the sanitizer was the size of containers. They gave gallon containers, which of course, if you pick up a gallon of anything, it's heavy. And I think that was the part that wasn't clear as this effort was launched. The city is also providing masks and gloves, and those are going to be mailed to all NYCHA residents. That's an initiative that is underway. In fact, one of the resident representatives on our board called or emailed earlier this week to say he received his package. And there's also, I think, additional initiative as more masks become available to hand those out on a citywide basis, not just at NYCHA, but some of the Mitchell-Lama properties as well. So there's going to be more opportunities for residents to secure this. And we're glad to support that and help with that where we can.
Can you speak about the rental hardship program? We had some questions about that. Alicia Robinson, Vernell Robinson had questions on when will managers get the go-ahead on the rental hardship program, and if you can explain what that program is for NYCHA residents.
So a couple things. Under the federal rules, because we have two sources of income, it's the rent that the families pay and the operating subsidy that HUD provides us to meet our expenses. Under those rules, the rent the families pay is based on income. And that is, they're eligible for adjustments when they lose income, and that's the rent hardship. So we've been vigorously working. First of all, folks can call in or make it known now if they've had a loss of income, and we would process what's called an interim recertification. And we're working to get a simplified connection for families to do that. And we hope to get our rental line, kind of hardship question line up either tomorrow or Friday, Monday at the outside. So if someone has a question, they can call in. HUD is permitting us, as a result of the pandemic, they've issued a waiver that we're going to take advantage of, and you can self-certify to this I think if you deal with NYCHA, you know, typically we're asking you for a piece of paper or, and oftentimes, especially now, it's really difficult to get that. We're going to take a self-certification of the loss of income, and we have, of course, the option to follow up later. At present, we're seeing about a 20% increase in people calling in. So we are taking those calls now and getting requests for these interims to take place. We estimate right now we have about 1,400 change of incomes in the system that we're processing. So we are processing the hardship in public housing, and we're going to simplify that process and bolster our turnaround time. The thing I want to say is if someone feels that they've been delayed or we didn't get to them, or they should not worry about that. We're not taking actions against families. We've suspended a lot of that activity. If your income goes down, we're going to adjust your rent. And if we miss your, if it comes too late in the month for your next rent cycle, it'll be retroactive back to the time of the income loss. So we will make that up to families. The same process is also happening on the voucher side with the voucher program, a very similar process.
And are the mask and gloves, this is a question from Doris McLaughlin, Ocean Bay Houses, are they a one-time mailing?
As far as I know, I don't think it was intended as a one-time mailing to families to get them started with protective gear.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. We're going to ask everybody to please, and we're going to go to Latoya LeGrand, Manny. And we're going to ask you if you can please be concise and precise with your question so we can try to get to as many. Time is winding down soon, and we want to try to get to as many questions as we can. So we'll go to Latoya LeGrand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. According to when we see a homeless person in our stairways, or we see a drug user in our stairways, the protocol with management will say is to make a 911 call and then get a complaint number and then give it to management, but nothing is happening. And with that being said, who funds PSA? What is PSA's role in NYCHA? What are they there for if we cannot go to them for issues like this? And I'm in South Jamaica Houses.
Okay, thank you. They're actually in the police department. They're part of NYPD, and we work very closely with them when we can. You can call and make those complaints also on the 311 number as well. But I do want to stress that we do, as I mentioned earlier, have more and more of these issues occurring. And we're going to be asking to meet with NYPD. We want to talk with DHS on the human services side and see if we can come up with a way to deal with some of this. There was a PSA there, I think at your property today, according to my staff, and they have promised vertical patrols. So if you are on the lookout, let us know if that's happening. But my understanding is there was some recognition of the problem you described with response today.
And Councilmember Adams, if you want to chime in on that.
I was just going to pretty much echo what Greg Russ just said. It is the responsibility of the NYPD and those officers over there. That's why they're there. And if they're not doing what they need to do, then we absolutely need to escalate that. That is why they are paid by the city of New York to protect our citizens. So if that's not happening, then we absolutely need to know about it so that we can make some phone calls post haste.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. All right, we're going to go to Kai Wiggins. I think I'm saying that right.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I have a question. It's about the transfer system. I put in a transfer and I work. So I pay my rent every two weeks. So that's considered late. But what I wanted to know is, can being late on your rent stop your transfer to move into another development?
It is possible, but again, if it's an individual case, I'd like to get your information and we can talk to you about if there's any circumstance that's somehow making it harder to do this.
Yeah, I put it in a year. Well, I recertified for the transfer. They sent me the paperwork and I sent it. And then yes.
Let me get your information because honestly,
yeah, we don't want to discuss that on this line with
everybody
here.
I want to help you out if we can, but I want to make sure that you get some service because these are really specific sometimes, and I want to be mindful of that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank
Just
you.
until we get the info and we can circle back to you, we will do that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I'll put in the question thing, and I guess I'll go to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll follow up. Carol Wilkins next.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Yes.
We hear you.
Yes, it's Carol Wilkins. I'm calling from Ravenswood. We're from Western Queens.
Hi.
In my development alone. Right now, we're running a food program, and we're still doing administering the masks and the hand sanitizer in the gallon bottles to our residents. I stopped my residents from my resident volunteers from going door to door, handing these things out because it's dangerous. The people that come to the door, they don't have masks on. They're not. We have to stand there and pump this stuff into a bottle. No, so I stopped it. Right now, we're waiting for the governor to deliver small bottles so that we can place them in a bag, put them on the door, and get out as fast as possible. It was quite unsettling when they sent those big gallon bottles to us. And then another question is, right now we're running the food program out of my office, which is in a building, an apartment building, and we need our community center at Ravenswood to be open so that we can serve the whole entire community, not just a few. It's so important that we get that community center open. Is there any possibility? No, well, they did call me. Miss Yuka Buskett did call me, tell me that they're looking into it. I just need to know it and when, and fast and soon. Thank you.
I do. First of all, I really sympathize with you on the hand sanitizer thing, and I'm really glad that they're going to give smaller bottles. I think that's like essential. And I also want to say that I also think it's very smart not to do the door to door. It's really difficult because a lot of people in their apartments are not going to have their mask on, obviously, mostly because they're not going outside. We are going to move. We have heard the request for access to the community center, and our staff confirmed that program will be moved to community center in the next few days. Nice. And the provider will confirm a start date, and you should be hearing from us very soon as to when you can start using that community facility.
That's great news. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing. It's really the volunteers and the unsung heroes from our developments who really are doing great work to service communities. And I certainly am supportive of community centers being done in a safe way, social distancing. And we've been doing a lot of work with our developments out in the Rockaways, dropping off 15,000 pounds of food, I think, a week, working with Urban Upbound as well, and campaign against hunger and other organizations. So I want to thank you for your work. Thank you, Greg, for that. All right, we're going to start to wind down. I'm going to get to about 2 more questions. Then we will begin. Adrienne and Daneek will have closing statements, and then Greg will close out. And I want to thank everybody for attending. So we're going to get down to the last 2. And please don't be a bot. But I'm assuming if you've been raising your hand this long, you're not a bot. So all right. All right, we're going to go to Galaxy Note 9. Not that's a name. Not that I think that's a real name. I don't think that's their name, but we're going to allow you to ask a question. So please identify yourself. Galaxy Note 9. All righty. They're not here? I don't know what your name is because you're coming up as Galaxy Note 9. All right, so we're going to skip you. We're going to go to Tanika Hughley. I think I'm saying that right. Tanika Hughley. And I'm going to ask folks, if you are calling about a personal situation, don't leave all your information out. Those are, we could follow up with you, but just give very short and concise information on what the issue is, if it's a personal issue. All right, so Tanika Hughley, Manny.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tanika Hughley. I am a former resident of Queensbridge Houses. However, my mom still resides there, and she is a recent retiree, who worked for NYCHA. So I'll make this really short and concise as I can. And I just tuned in, so please excuse me if you're ready to discuss this. But one, I was wondering if there was a moratorium on evictions and transfers. I know someone just asked about a transfer, but that was more of a personal thing. But I know, I'm not exactly sure what the process is in New York City at the moment with moratoriums on evictions and transfers, because if families are evicted, obviously at this point, it may be hard for them to find housing. And then the second question I had was, what are the precautions that caretakers are taking to sanitize? And are there any changes in how the buildings are cleaned and sanitized? As someone who lived in Queensbridge Houses my whole life, I've seen people clean the buildings in different ways. And at this time, I think a thorough cleaning is definitely needed. So I was just wondering if there was any changes. Last but not least, as far as social distancing, we residents of NYCHA do not really have the opportunity to social distance properly or as we would like compared to people in other neighborhoods. And often a lot of our NYCHA developments are policed, and it makes it hard for families to take their children outside. And if people just wanted to sit out on the bench, then you're too close, or it's just a large gathering. So I was wondering if there are any programs or activities or practices that NYCHA has in mind to help the folks of the New York City developments to practice safe and healthy social distancing.
Tanika, thanks so much. Let's talk about the first question, which is eviction. Yes, there is a moratorium. In fact, state, city, and federal. And maybe the federal was enacted as part of the CARES legislation that Congress passed a few weeks ago. And in HUD-assisted housing, which public housing is part of that world, we're suspending those for 120 days from the date of passage of the CARES Act, which would mean through the end of July. I think depending on where we are, there's every probability that that may be continued because the last thing we want to do is put someone out because of a rent issue or something like that. So we're not taking those actions at the current time. On your building cleaning, yes, there are differences. We're continuing with the caretakers to do their basic work that they would normally do as part of their routines. But we've also hired 2 vendors to do citywide cleaning for the entire NYCHA portfolio. It's 5 times a week in the senior buildings, 3 times a week in the families. It is not an entire common area or lobby. It is high touch point areas like the doorknobs and handles and so forth. And they're using approved disinfecting products. And it's a supplementary cleaning is how I like to think of it. But we have instituted that in early March, mid-March, I think March 11th and March 13th, around there we started. And we also are monitoring really heavily to make sure that the vendors are doing what they say that they're doing. I think your last one is probably the hardest of all. I've gone to a lot of our properties and been in a lot of the common spaces, and it's tight and you want to get outside. My staff is telling me that there is some online things that folks are doing now to help keep kids busy. I think it's called City Children's Cabinet, and they have a virtual tool that you can use to help if you have kids in the household. With respect to your question on outside in the grounds, you know, we're trying to be respectful with staff and practice social distancing as a staff. We actually monitor that, in fact, every day. And I think as if this goes on, there will be some things that we could advise. We have sent posters and notices around, but you know, we're repeating what the Department of Health is telling us on the 6 foot and the covering your coughs and so forth. But as we roll into summer, I was moved by the comments we had at the beginning of this about the summer youth program issues, because that is a very important program. We benefit from that as well. But I don't have a good answer for you on social distancing and practices that I could share, other than what we've already shared with you in terms of communication and best practices from the health department. But I think one of the things our community engagement and partnership group will be doing is working with other providers, other entities, other departments in the city to see if we can't get some things that help with that as we roll into the summertime.
Thank you for that answer. And thank you, ma'am, for contacting us. All right, we're going to go to the last question now. Helene Manny. Helen. Oh, Helen. Helen here. All right, we'll go to Rohan.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you now. Yes.
Yeah, hi. I'm the second vice president of Bailey Houses. Glad to meet you guys because I never knew who you was. I have a two-part question. The first question I want to thank you for the hand sanitizers in the bottle. I hear people complaining, but you know what? I got it and I made it work. I wasn't afraid to go to no one's door because I had on my PPE. And you know, when those people opened the door and I gave them masks and I poured that hand sanitizer, they was grateful. And I want to thank you guys for that, because you can't be ungrateful in this time. You know, we couldn't have got that. So I made it as the second vice president of Bailey Housing. I made it work. And I want to thank you guys for that. The other question is our roof. We was able to get $3 million allotted for our roof in Bailey Houses, and it's still no money's come. I keep hearing it's in Daneek, then Daneek blaming on NYCHA, then NYCHA saying it's Daneek, then it goes around and around. Victor Pachado, who's our elected official, he helped us get the money. I mean, what's going on with our roof? It's leaking, it's coming down in apartments. Now they put up a big scaffold around the building. It's been up for months. They said it was the bricks. We thought it was the starting of the construction before the COVID got started of the roof, for the roof. Now they talking about it's for bricks. This roof is dangerous. It's gonna end up caving in on someone. We did a walkthrough with the news, that woman, Morales. We did a walkthrough. We went up on that roof with the elected officials, and 1 4 step, it's gonna cave in on somebody one day.
All right, got it.
I'm afraid of.
Great. All right, Greg, if you can answer where they at.
So Helen, if you could leave your number, I'd like to give you a call as a follow-up person to person, but you're right. We are waiting for the state to approve this project. I'm going to check with Capital, because when I talk with you, I would like to get some real specific information and give you some sense of where this is, and give you something that's focused on the issue, because we have the same concerns. And what I know now is we are waiting for state approval, but let me see if I can get some more information on what that means.
Thank you, Russ. So we're going to begin to close out. Just, Russ, before we go, I just had to give you this. 309 Beach 54th Street, Doris McLaughlin, and this is something we've given to your staff. The doors at that particular, and this is Oceanside Apartments.
Okay.
In the Rockaways, the door needs to be fixed. So there's a lot of that loitering going on in there. I don't know if, and I know that they're probably going to get new doors through the Sandy work, most likely. But in the meantime, those doors need to be locked. We did have a shooting this week on that block directly adjacent to that specific building because of the activity there. So that, you know, until I know there are other things going on with the, you know, God willing, with other people, but we, in the meantime, should at least look at that to make sure that those doors are secured.
Councilman, we'll have maintenance get out there and take a look at it.
Great. All righty. Okay, so I want to go to Councilmember Adams, then Miller for final remarks, and we'll go to you, Greg. But I want to thank everybody for attending this town hall tonight. Very informational. Great to hear just the variation of different issues from around the borough that impact NYCHA residents. I want y'all to continue to tune in every Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, right? I can't even keep up with the days. But every Wednesday we are doing these sort of town halls, so look out for the next one next Wednesday as well, with probably a different agency head or different subject matter. I want to thank you all for coming out and for being respectful, and want to thank our chair as well, who has just come to New York City technically, but has a very good record from what I hear around the country on NYCHA issues. But, you know, New York City is a different beast. So we're going to have to make sure here that we hold you much more accountable, and we will do that. So
I have no doubt, Councilman.
So look forward to hearing from you. And we all, I think, sit on the NYCHA committee as well. I know I do as well. So we look forward to budget discussions this year as well. So God bless you. Thank you all for coming out. We'll go to Councilmember Adams, Miller, then Russ to close this out.
Well, I again extend my thanks to my colleague, Councilmember Donovan Richards, for calling us together tonight. Chair Gregory Russ, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. We heard a bit of enthusiasm from NYCHA residents this evening, and that encourages me. Know that they spoke up, the residents spoke up. They really let us know what's going on and how we can help. And I think that it's really important that we just hone in, because this is such a devastating time. Everybody, and as we heard tonight, there was no one issue that was the same. So there are a million issues going across our NYCHA residents' hearts and minds that we really have to tend to. It's for me, the main thing for me over the past couple of months or so, and again, I mentioned at the top of this meeting, was that there aren't too many of us that have not been impacted by COVID-19. So for me, testing has been a priority, and how to get that throughout our Southeast Queens area, throughout our communities. And I'm excited about Ready Responders, as was mentioned. It is something that our congressman is working on. It's a pilot program. It's already gone through the Rockaways, looking at South Jamaica houses. If not by the end of this week, then certainly by next week. And it is something that we want extended to all public housing in New York City. So we're excited about that. There are wonderful medical staff of doctors and medical teams that actually go door to door to apartments, and they actually ask residents if they would like to be tested. So no one has to come out. No one has to worry about the issues of social distancing by going outside or getting transportation anywhere. Ready Responders will come to your door. So I personally am really excited about the prospect of testing across our NYCHA houses. And again, I thank everyone for spending your time with us. We know it's not easy. We know we don't have all of the answers, but certainly I hope that you all know that we are concerned. So thank you to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Russ. And I'm wishing everybody a safe, blessed, and happy evening.
Councilmember Miller. Councilmember Miller. Oh, we don't hear you. There you go. You're unmuted now. Start over.
Yeah. I didn't want you to hear the washing machine in the back.
Sure, you heard D3 all night singing.
All the other
That's
honeydew
right.
stuff that goes on when you are socially distancing, right? So I just want to thank you once again for pulling this together. Councilmember Adams as well. Chair Russ, thank you to you and your team. An unenviable task that you have there. But as Councilmember Richard says, that this was great because you actually got to hear from the residents of NYCHA. And you know, this was Southeast Queens and Queens, but certainly we heard from Brooklyn and Manhattan as well. And so there is real consistency about how services get delivered or do not get delivered. And so glad that you were on the line to hear that. But more importantly, that we're engaging and that you know that not just the elected and the tenant president's leadership, we are working together, but residents as well, to make sure that we mitigate ourselves and our constituency through COVID-19, but there are also a plethora of outstanding NYCHA concerns that really manifests itself this evening. The fact that we have these long-term capital projects that aren't happening and really impacting the quality of life of our residents in a way. And quite frankly, we understand the minutia of government and it requires the type of collaboration that we're talking about here tonight. So we're talking here, this engagement is more about a collaboration, how we support each other as we move forward. I'm glad to see that I saw Brian and the rest of your team on the line as well, and know that we're constantly talking about a number of concerns that we have. And this is just not talking at you or to you. It is also letting you know that we are a resource as well, and that we want to be able to leverage the resources that we have in order to facilitate a better quality of life for our NYCHA residents. And so we look forward to working with you and your team. And quite frankly, welcome to the Dream Team.
Greg.
Hey, thank you, council members. Just a couple things. I do believe that there's hope for these buildings and improvement to come. And some of that is because in the kind of collaboration that you all have offered, and including thinking about what it means to make NYCHA new again, we have to muster all the strength and power. And the power is not with an individual person who happens to be the chair of NYCHA. That's a position. It's out there with you. It's out there with the individuals who called in. And one of the things that will happen as we advance these capital ideas, these are large numbers that are going to be needed to stabilize these properties and make them give them a quality standard of living. And these will be billions of dollars, not millions, billions. And my hope is, as we go down this road and share this time, that we will gather our strength, because we will need it. And we will be able to articulate very clearly, though, to those that could help us, that this investment is worth it. This investment is essential, not only to sustaining the buildings, but we believe this experience we're having with COVID, we can actually change the health dynamics in these communities if we're smart about what we do there when we do this work. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you for inviting me to this, and I look forward to working with all of you and with the residents who have called in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us, Russ, Chairman Russ. And let me just remind people, my2020census.gov is the website you can go to fill out your census. Once again, my2020census.gov. I did it online, literally took 15 minutes. Also just got a plug, June 23rd is our primary elections here. And I'm not going to talk about mines, obviously, but June 23rd is the new date for the election, for the primary elections right here across the state and in the city. So please make sure you get out and vote as well. You know, I always say NYCHA is a city in itself. If NYCHA residents organized and got out and figured out ways to leverage their voting and political power as well, we would see a different NYCHA. So we all have to work together, but we have to also learn how to cultivate the power that we have within our developments, because that's how you get folks to actually pay attention as well. We're paying attention because we care. All of us are here, but there are higher beings out there that we have to deal with as well at different levels of government. And we need to make noise and let folks know that, you know, we're going to use our collective power to shift real change, which drives the resources down to developments. I also just remind people, social distance, social distance, social distance. Do not be selfish. There are many residents, young people too. If young people are here listening, we need you to really know that you're just not impacting yourself. You could be asymptomatic, which means that you don't show any signs that you have the virus, but you may have it. So we need people to really practice that, be cautious, be careful, and we are all here for each and every one of you. So thank you. God bless you all. I'm going to sing happy birthday to my mother-in-law now, but want to thank you all for coming out this evening. God bless you all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.